Welcome to SEC Football Live here from the 440 Sports Network. That is Stephen Godfrey. I am Braden Gall, and we're going to talk about college football. We're going to talk about Texas and Tennessee and Alabama and Mississippi State and Auburn and Arkansas and LSU and South Carolina and Kentucky, Stephen. A lot of things. We will not be discussing.
You're not going to make me talk about Kentucky. This is a free country.
Listen, you told me last week to take 10 points, lay it, and run to the bank, and you could not have been more wrong.
Gambling's a sin. Gambling's a sin.
You could not have been more wrong. However, I was right there with you and also could not have been more wrong. However, we were dead right about Texas. We were dead right about Tennessee. We're not taking victory laps, but we're going to tell you what it all means, as well as a big conversation about what the college football playoff, how it's already hanging over. I know you were very sort of like, hey, let's stop focusing on the college football playoff. It's eating everything else, all the great stories in college football over the last 10 years. The college football playoff now does still hang over everybody, but at least now it includes as many teams as possible, at least for now. And so what does that mean? What does that mean for the SEC as Notre Dame loses and other things around the country are happening? We're going to get to that in a second. But Godfrey, at 38 Godfrey, of course, you can get to him there. You can get to him split zone duo, easy for me to say, split zone duo.com. There you go. He will not be live on Instagram at any point during the show today. Otherwise, lots of stuff to get to today.
I was just going to keep my phone. It's just on scores.
I just have my
swear to God.
I just have my betting app pulled up. That's all. That's all I'm doing. That's all I'm doing. All right. So I want to start this show, though, however, in a place and in a way that even you and your wonderful team at Split Zone Duo can't claim. A place we're going to start this show that no other show on the internet covering college football or the SEC is ever going to start. And I've got to ask you, what is the proper terminology and proper appropriate language to discuss a large human scoring a touchdown? If you were watching the Mississippi State football game, because I got scolded by my wife, and I've got a question for you. This has got a purpose. Blake Shapen at Mississippi State, very sloppy. Not a good football game for them against Arizona State. Tip of the cap to Kenny Dillingham and what they're doing at Arizona State. Sack fumble around the 5-yard line, mid to late second quarter, really kind of breaks the game open. And a 310-pound defensive lineman by the name of CJ Feet, number 99, steps over the quarterback, Blake Shapen, scoops the football up, and toe taps the pylon in perfect wide receiver little person form. So I said, hey, look at that fat guy touchdown. My wife was like, what are you doing? You can't say that anymore. You, in a former life, used to give an award out, I think. You and some of your friends, I can't remember who exactly was giving out the award for.
That was Vox Media's original SB Nation.
The Piesman, right? Is what you guys.
Piesman, yeah.
So I've heard large man, I've heard big man, and I've said fat guy my whole life. I realized that I wouldn't say that around my daughters, I guess, anymore.
Okay.
Just from like a. I'm curious, what is the proper nomenclature for a large man touchdown?
Thick six.
Thick six?
Yeah, that's Mike Golick, Golick Jr.'s. And I swear, when he started doing that, it was like sort of on the heels of the Piesman not existing anymore. And it's not like he reached out for approval because Goalie actually played the game. It was just like we sort of we like the old SB Nation Banner Society crew sort of like passed the torch to him. Probably big man. Big man is probably what I go with because you're also on the lookout for like a fumble recovery by an O lineman who then advances the ball. I think that's the same spirit of it,
or a goal line extra tackle, little play action pass. I mean,
jumbo sets,
those are beautiful. Those are beautiful.
I'm thinking of Laramie Tunsil scoring a touchdown in the Sugar Bowl. Like, yeah.
There you go. I'm just it was a wonderfully agile play by a very large man, and it did sort of end the game for Mississippi State.
2 weeks in a row where Arizona State has had amazing fun and lucky football. And they deserve it because they survived Herm Edwards. So maybe the universe is smiling back.
I don't know if anybody's ever been accused of not having enough fun in Tempe, but that's another story for another day. All right, I just wanted to start there because I thought, you know what? No one else is going to start there. And these are the important questions of our time. So, all right. Thick six. Is it spelled?
Thick six. The thick six is like, I think Goalie did it for a charity, and I believe it's a home field shirt too. But if you're asking what is the most common reference, it's probably big man, big guy, big man, I think is the most ubiquitous.
Okay.
I think
And it's THICC, right? It's not with a K.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Look, these are the important questions of our time. All right. I was looking at the preseason rankings. Number 3 was Oregon. Number 7 was Notre Dame. Number 9 was Michigan. Number 10 was Florida State. Number 14 was Clemson. Number 15 was LSU. Number 16 was Oklahoma. Number 20 was Texas A&M. 22 was Kansas. 24 was NC State, and 25 was Iowa. I'm using those rankings just as a reference point here. All of them except for Oregon have lost at least once. And a lot of those losses were to unranked teams or to not good teams relative to the expectations of the season. I say all of that as Georgia looks very good. Texas looks even better, and we expected them to look good. Tennessee was completely dominant against an NC State team. And Ole Miss and Missouri, we'll find out more about them as the season goes along, but they look pretty salty. Bama looks pretty good as well. That's at least 6 teams that have great quarterback play and pretty good defensive line and offensive line play, and are all ranked in the top 12 right now. Ultimately, in the playoff era, we'll get to how this has already made every single game more important. Boston College and Missouri is now an incredibly important game. It does feel like the rest of the country is doing its best to open up as many doors as possible for the SEC.
I want to put a caveat in front of everything we're about to talk about. It is the eve of week 3. Okay?
It's never too early to overreact, Stephen.
It is the eve of week 3. One more time. I am not going to give Greg Sankey this much credit because God knows the media spends enough time giving Greg Sankey credit for things he didn't do. But the way the one-off schedule has happened to fall, where normally the SEC schedule is determined X amount of years in advance, and there's in the old division format, there'd be a cross-division rotation. And so you had a pretty good idea of, hey, if I'm South Carolina, I'm going to play these teams in the coming years. For those of you who don't know, they've kind of been laying down the tracks as the train goes because of realignment. There were a lot of non-conference contracts that had to be fixed. And this has a point because this is the exact time we're sitting in. So like Georgia, Oklahoma, for instance, had a 1-1 as obviously non-conference members. They had to get rid of that.
Yep.
So you've had some weird schedules and you had a lot of ad hoc scheduling in the 16 format. The 3 teams that you mentioned, this is why I think this has some validity to watch. Missouri, Tennessee, and Ole Miss don't play each other. It is very likely that those teams are worth 2 losses. I would feel pretty confident about both of those teams. If you just scan very quickly, even with the information we have now, those teams are worth 2 losses apiece.
You mean if you played all 3 of them?
No, I'm saying that. Sorry, they are going to lose 2 games each.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
But they probably
they could all be 10-2.
But they're probably not going to lose 3.
Yeah.
This is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Because each of them has either Georgia or Alabama or both.
Yep.
None of those 3 see each other to create a determinate data point. So like Braden wasn't joking when he said the Boston College game is important to Missouri this weekend, because we are about to get into, oh man, just the media cycle from hell, I think, starting around Halloween, if this tracks the way I think it is, which is we have 6 teams that, by the way, I'm not talking about LSU because I don't even understand LSU yet. So I'm not saying that someone couldn't upset this, but then they themselves would insert themselves into an overloaded conversation. LSU and Oklahoma, I don't understand yet. I'm not dismissing you. I don't know how to categorize you.
I agree with you on LSU. I don't understand LSU yet either. I agree with you on that. I think that they are categorized as this in-between thing that it was good enough to play USC, a top 15 team, to a basic stalemate. And I think that's about where they are. It's where I thought they were going to be. Oklahoma is totally different to me. Oklahoma has a much more difficult schedule than LSU, and they have bigger problems. Injuries at wide receiver, offensive line, totally new court. Like, they have bigger problems, I feel like. So I would push back on, I think LSU is more in this conversation. I think Oklahoma is not.
Well, Oklahoma has an insertion into these schedules and catching teams at certain times. And I do think they have a base level of talent where they can cause problems of the 6 plus LSU. So you have 3 teams that pretty much everyone would feel comfortable putting in a 12-team playoff tomorrow. which is either Georgia or Texas as the SEC champion and Alabama as the sort of bridesmaid. That's pretty much how everyone has scoped this thing out, right? The second problem is you still have 3 teams underneath that.
Yeah.
And if those 3 teams underneath those have only lost to the teams above them, which is possible in Tennessee's case, in Missouri's case, Ole Miss, you could see maybe dropping at LSU. Actually, I think they're going to lose at LSU. Okay. They don't have anything in comparable opponent. It's actually a very weak schedule until they go to Baton Rouge in midseason, which is not where that game normally sits. It is a rivalry. There's a lot of stuff going on. Kiffin and BK don't like each other. So I could see that one creating the 10-2 logjam. So now what we have to do is go, all right, do we have 6 teams in? Who's holding serve with those bottom 3? Penn State. Who do you feel good about making this argument against right now? Penn State?
Well, so okay, So Josh says the incoming arguments over whose 10 wins are better will be epic. So this is this goes right back to every college football playoff debate we've ever had, which is resume versus like eye test, blah 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 blah. And like you are not the contents of your resume, but like that's also the only thing we have to go on. And so, like with Tennessee, for example, I think they would get the benefit of the doubt over Missouri and Ole Miss based on strength of schedule. Now, maybe that's the NC State game, maybe it's not. I don't know. That's what makes this Boston College game so important for Missouri, because they don't have the out of conference thing. Neither does Ole Miss. And I would argue the fact that, I mean, Ole Miss is going to have some in conference games that are maybe even better than what Missouri's got. Missouri is going to be 3rd out of the 3 from a strength of schedule standpoint. So to your question, you're saying if I was going to line up, I say all that to say I would line up Tennessee against almost any one of these teams and say elite running game, elite defensive line, great offensive line, and probably a quarterback that's going to continue to get better and better as the season goes along. That's a scary combination. Ole Miss is kind of in the same category. Missouri, I still need to see a little bit more of it, but I would pick all of them over Penn State. I know Penn State had a nice win over West Virginia, and that was a good road win, weird day, weather, etc. But they don't seem to have taken a step. Again, 2 weeks. I got it. Drew Aller doesn't look like he's developed beyond where he was last year. They don't look like they've added any weapons on the outside. I'm not trying to get into a 1-for-1 competition here, but ultimately, when you have all of these teams that are in the top 20 already having a loss, Oklahoma State took a small resume hit this week, especially if a team like Tennessee goes on the road and destroys Arkansas. Not saying that's going to happen, but if they do in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you're going to have a like for like competition there, comparison. And I don't know how much the committee is going to get into that.
But the difference here is that some of these edge cases by the Big 2 standard, in the Big 10, they're actually going to see each other. So case in point, I don't disagree with anything that you said about Penn State. The problem right now is that they're like, and I know the schedule game is not the wisest way to determine this. Their next 3 are Kent State, Illinois, UCLA. Okay. They're at USC, which is going to be kind of a swing game in terms of playoff bid. I mean, I think that's fair to say. The only team that is definitively better than them right now is Ohio State.
You're saying Penn State?
I'm talking about Penn State. They have Ohio. They have Ohio State. I'm talking on their schedule. Sorry, on the schedule.
Yeah.
So they are going. They very much look like a barring implosion 10-2 team again. So we will be measuring these resumes, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we're going to get into now, but hear me out. If they win at USC, or maybe they drop one at Wisconsin or whatever, and they lose to Ohio State, they win out, or it's Washington or something like that. We are going to have to get into the weeds. To your point, again, I'm not
Boston College,
about
Missouri.
Boston College, Missouri is what were these worth at the time? How do they look now? And here's the scary part. And this is where I like the 12-team playoff. I like it a lot. But it's going to get real semantic real fast because
I know.
This is a committee. This isn't a computer. This isn't SP+. This isn't FPI. This isn't any of the advanced metrics. What is Boston College going to be worth in the minds of that committee in November?
No idea. No way to tell. But this is ultimately the point of this conversation, because we can't solve anything or answer anything with this conversation. We can have fun debating teams and what we think we know so far through 2 weeks. But what is worth noting is that remember, I mean, you know this because I think you guys have done like long form discussions about 2007. It's the craziest college football year we've ever had. It's only 2 loss champion. We had, I believe, at one point it was like South Florida versus Kentucky for the Natty at one point, and then like West Virginia and Missouri both lost, et cetera.
It was West Virginia, Missouri on the last day.
Yeah, as like a 40-point underdog to like Pittsburgh and whatever. Anyway, future SEC Big 12 championship game, Missouri and Oklahoma was a big one in that season.
It was, yeah.
But ultimately, we haven't really had anything close to that, and I'm not suggesting we're on that path. But if you are a fan of Missouri in particular, because I think their resume puts them third of 3 in the SEC. If Tennessee and Ole Miss and Missouri all are 10-2, which I think is very possible, Missouri's resume probably puts them at third in committee eyes, hypothetically. What they then need to get into the playoff, and they are no less deserving of this spot based on what they accomplish, is that you need a whole lot of shit to happen all around the sport. And you need to be rooting every single weekend. You need to watch Iowa and Iowa State if you're a Missouri fan now. Like if you're an Alabama fan, you have to pay attention to Michigan State. Maybe, I don't know, but you have to know what's going on with these other teams.
Maybe not MSU, but yeah, I get your point. Yeah,
I am on team Jonathan Smith, but that's just me. So
I am too. No, I think he's a great hire.
I think if you're Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, you have to pay attention to Tennessee against NC State. And that is sort of what the playoff has done from an interest standpoint. Again, Texas and Michigan, by the way, 9.35 million viewers. It would have been number 5 in the regular season last year. 2 huge brands, so no way to tell if that game is more important or less important to the group think. But the ratings aren't going to take a hit. I don't believe that we're going to lose interest in the games that are big. I think that's been been a fallacy from the beginning. But you're Michigan, Notre Dame, Florida State, Clemson, NC State, Iowa, Texas A&M, Kansas, Oklahoma, and LSU have all lost already. And the more that happens, the better it is for Missouri and Ole Miss and Tennessee. Now, maybe for Alabama too, frankly.
I would be a little worried about the premise here because I also think it was a really dumb preseason top 25. And I think again, look, if you want to build a foundation of an argument, you can't ignore the context. The portal and the transient nature of both coaching staffs and skill position players is clouding the picture tremendously. As someone who still does the coach gossip features for Athlon, where I have to write 134 scouting profiles in March, because that magazine has certainly got ideas on how to gather news.
They don't know shit about shit in March?
In March, they're like, hey, could you ask coaches what they think about the roster of a team across the division in March?
Tell me who's going to be on the team.
Get right on that.
Yeah.
I think the preseason top 25 is not the predictor of chaos. I think the predictor of chaos will be the unevenness of a lot of these quote unquote, like good, very good teams, not the excellent, not Georgia, not Texas, not Ohio State, etc.
Oklahoma State.
I think
they're very uneven.
Arkansas handed them a game.
Dude, Arkansas had like 700 yards of offense and lost.
Oh,
you know how hard that is to do?
And still needed like catastrophically bad officiating to get to overtime.
Yeah, it was brutal.
I think there's a class of very good teams that are fatally flawed in a lot of similar ways, just because this is how we build rosters now. And that is going to create the volatility. Yep. The thing about 7 is that I don't see those monoliths at the top falling apart the way things fell apart in 7. Meaning,
yeah.
going into 7, it was very hard to discern the best 5 teams in the country. And then this year, it's like there are 3 teams you cannot avoid discussing week in and week out: Texas, Georgia, and Ohio State.
Well, let me bring it back to the SEC teams then, because I think you're right to talk about the very good but not great teams as the ones that this affects potentially, or that you need to track and pay attention to, because you're not sure which of those very good teams sort of steps up, right? There's lots of the beauty of college football is Missouri. You can be 6-6, 6-6, 6-6, and then win 10 games and have a historically good season. And that season now is rewarded with a postseason opportunity. And that's the beauty of the whole thing. That's the whole point. But I don't think, here's what's interesting. This is not me shilling on an SEC program with a couple of SEC grads here. That's not what this is. I actually believe that Ole Miss, Missouri, and Tennessee are above the fold. I actually think they are among the 12 best teams in college football. I thought that before the season, and I kind of think that now based on what I've seen. That could all be misproven and disproven, and I could be wrong about that. I think it's LSU and Oklahoma are the two that I'm sort of going, are you good? Are you very good? Are you really, really good? LSU's going to go on the road this weekend. They're going to play South Carolina in what is I guess, a college game day atmosphere. Not a knock on South Carolina's game day atmosphere, by the way. They're great. But Oklahoma struggled against Houston. They have a lot more problems, I think, than LSU has already said. Those are the teams that I think are in the I'm not sure what they are mode. I actually believe Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Missouri are on the top. They're not Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, but they are like, is Oregon discernibly better than Ole Miss and Tennessee? Not yet.
Two of them might be, but right now, the only reason I would look, I maybe it's because I worked with Bill Connolly for so long, or it's just knowing the fallacy of how these polls are created. You have to inform yourself on the data points. And 2 weeks in, Missouri and Ole Miss are essentially without any data. Yeah. They are essentially unknown. The teams that they've played, in Ole Miss's case, they played Furman and a first-year Middle Tennessee State team that is changing both schemes and almost turning over the whole roster.
Look, Steven, I covered the Tennessee Titans in my day job, and I've seen Will Levis not be able to complete 9 yards per pass against air. So I'll give Ole Miss a little credit. 9.2 yards per play is impressive against air. So just let's point that. That's a first down every snap. That's insane.
I would feel close to verifying it maybe if they create the same kind of lopsided scoring result on the road at Wake this weekend. Missouri's played no one either. I'm not discounting these teams. I'm not going to look in defense of Tennessee. You can't include them with Tennessee. Tennessee went to a neutral site game and played I don't want to say quality opponent, a better opponent, it's not my fault that NC State doesn't know how to use Grayson McCall after he showed them literally how to do it. But that's not Tennessee's fault either. No, they went in and executed, literally executed NC State. So this is where I feel weird about just inserting the 6 is that once a year we do this, someone quietly walks through an incredibly easy schedule.
Yep.
That hides, again, that fatal flaw, whatever it might be. You have to be honest.
But isn't that Ole Miss in Missouri potentially this year? I mean, I'm not saying that
they have fatal flaws. Absolutely.
Right.
Oh, without a doubt. This was the knock against the Big Ten. This is why the Big Ten off the record will tell you we want early season conference losses at the top because we want to prove that teams can take a quality loss and get better on the resume. This is what Jim Delaney would see over back in the day. This is why they bring in 3 out of 4 really good programs from the West. So you don't have Ohio State sleepwalking to Halloween. And so the SEC is a little bit more used to this. The problem this year is that at random, the universe gave us 3 of these sub-tier teams that aren't going to play each other.
And this is to your point about Sankey not getting credit for this. And this is sort of where I've been saying this about Oklahoma all summer. It is Oklahoma's schedule any other period of time in the SEC would not be as daunting as it is today. But the fact that you are playing Ole Miss, Missouri, and Tennessee all when they are up is extremely rare. That is just not a normal place for those 3 teams to all be at the same time. But the key is it's legitimate. That's the key. We could talk about Tennessee's domination of NC State, and I could go through a list of quality points about Tennessee's team, and I could get to 5 or 6 before I talk about the quarterback. And that is what makes Tennessee dangerous. You could talk James Pierce. You could talk defensive line. You could talk front 7. You could talk play calling. You could talk offensive line and running game. And then you might go, and Nico played all right in that game. And that's where Tennessee feels different to some degree. And Ole Miss might prove this in the next few weeks. Missouri, again, Boston College. Look, Castellanos is a fun little jitterbug player. He's tough to stop.
He's from the Jake Hayner school of self-sacrifice.
He is fun to watch.
You remember Garrett Schrader at Mississippi State, and then he went to Syracuse?
God. That guy would fly through the air.
I don't care about my body. Oklahoma might lose this.
Overrated.
Oklahoma might lose this weekend, and I wouldn't consider it to be that much of an upset against Tulane, based on the way I think that they could scheme them up defensively.
13.5-point favorite. Sean House says Missouri has the 14th strength of schedule remaining in the country. I need to double check that. I'm not arguing with you, Sean, but I just need to check that. Jake asks, how far does Tennessee fall after an Oklahoma loss in a few weeks? If Oklahoma's 3-0, I don't see them losing. Frankly, because of the defensive front for Tennessee, Oklahoma has major issues on the offensive line right now. The receivers are hurt. Jackson Arnold was inconsistent last week against Houston. Right now, if they played, I would pick Tennessee to maul the Oklahoma offensive front. But if they do lose, that is back to our original point. You lose on the road to Oklahoma, but you beat Bama at home later in the year. You lose to Georgia on the road. That is still a playoff resume. a road loss to a 9-win Oklahoma team, 8-win Oklahoma team. That's with all the emotion of the game. I hope the committee takes those kinds of things into context. I still think that 10-2 Tennessee team can get into the playoff easily.
If you want to be a self-loathing Tennessee fan, which most of them are, and you want a 9-2 Tennessee team is going to go into Vanderbilt at the end of the season, trying to keep pace with Missouri and Ole Miss. Enjoy.
Diego Pavia.
Look, you want to be self-loathing. Let me give it to you.
Is Diego Pavia still alive? Are his legs intact to his body? Like, are they still attached?
Is his spleen still inside of his actual body cavity?
If he's alive, then maybe there's a chance.
They got us. We're not going to spend a lot of time on the Alcorn game, but guess what? I was like, well, they'll hand it off. Go look at that box score. They ran the same thing they ran against Virginia Tech.
Don't quote me on this. I want to say he's like 6th or 7th in the nation in quarterback rush yards, and I think he has the most carries of any of them. I think that's not a good trend for a little guy who's listed at 6 foot. I stood next to him. He's 5'9" at the best.
They play Texas in like 5 weeks, and there's like 3 or 4 more defenses as tough that they're going to see. It's not a good idea.
So I guess I'll ask as a follow-up here about all of this. It seems like Georgia and Texas are on a different platform and tier than we're talking about. We told you guys that Texas was in a different place. Like, look, as we said, they were in a different place in their relationship than Michigan was. Texas was ready to get married. Mm-hmm. Michigan was still drunk and still trying to flirt at the bar. Texas is in a for all the things we've talked about here. Oregon struggling. The SEC has not really had that at the top with their teams. Georgia looked in sync in the second half against Clemson. Tennessee looked dominant. Alabama has had. We'll talk about Bama in a second because they're going to play Wisconsin this weekend. Alex Golesh. If I'm a coach, if I'm an offensive coach, I am calling Alex Golesh to find out what he is doing to Alabama.
Oh, I think some schools are going to be calling Alex Golesh very soon.
He was the OC for Tennessee when they beat him 3 years ago, and he's given them major fits the last 2 years at South Florida. But we'll get to Bama in a second. Texas is just, of all these teams that sort of needed some time to figure themselves out, find their identity, get challenged, et cetera, Texas didn't need any of that shit. They just went up there and said, look, we're going to run our stuff. Quinn Ewers was in complete control. They did exactly what they wanted to do on almost every phase of that game, and they could have made it a lot worse if they wanted to, I thought.
I don't think that's going to hold up as a quality win. And I'm not trying to incite some sort of like Big Ten SEC thing. I just think it is very much, even more so than people wanted to realize, maybe in some corners of the media, a Michigan program in total transition, whereas Texas is peaking and competing for a national championship. So to that end, I get a little suspicious, a little bit on teams that don't have the sort of quality reflection point. I don't feel that way with Texas necessarily, because they aren't really creating any doubt against inferior opponents yet. There's nothing really about that Michigan game where you think like, oh, well, they held serve or they solved for this. They have a pillowy soft run until Red River. They have a bye week, 2 terrible out of conference games because UTSA is not what it was.
They're Texas State.
They got smoked by Texas State. No, UTSA is turning over pretty much everything, and it's going to be one of those years for them. Again, that's fine. Red River is Red River. I will say this: if you're an SEC fan that's watching this or listening to this, and you're traditional SEC, sort of southeastern footprint, Red River has a rich and illustrious history of not underdog upset, underdog domination. Like the poorer, weaker team coming in and controlling line of scrimmage, creating turnovers, like whipping ass. So I don't
5-7 Charlie Strong team beating a 10-win box.
I was
team.
there. Yeah. I was at that game covering it, and it was as gobsmacking to it just did not make sense. So that is not one that I'll breeze by. The other thing I would point out is that Red River is a week before they host Georgia. So it's coming for them. I think they just, as long as you don't play with your food until then, there's no reason to pass a referendum.
No, and Texas has played with its food a lot in the past. We'll find out if Sark has eliminated that from their.
Braden, I still cannot believe that the coach who eliminated doubt and eliminated that sort of laissez-faire weakness and the recruiting entitlement and everything that used to be able to knock Texas for is Steve Sarkisian. I never saw this coming. No, honestly.
Well, I think there's going to be a book written about the boosters and the power brokers that basically forced Tom Herman's firing and said, no, we're not bringing that guy back. We're going to get this guy. And that it was, Kevin Eltief's the name that you guys all need to know. He's the top the top guy on the board of trustees for the University of Texas system, and he is the guy who sort of led the they were going to bring Tom Herman back, and he said, no, hold up, we're not going to do that.
Well,
we'll get into that later.
The story that's, I'll put it this way. Once the SEC move was confirmed before it was announced, and this is a month in advance, they immediately went scouting for an SEC coach.
Well, sure.
And that's what they got.
So Boston College, Missouri, real fast. I'm not going to belabor it because we're more of a what does it all mean versus previewing the games. I do think Missouri right now, number 2 in the nation, 2.49 yards per play on defense, but that is still the area of question for them. I don't have any questions about Kirby Moore and Brady Cook and Luther Burden in that offensive line. I have more questions about losing a pass rushing, an NFL pass rusher, an NFL middle linebacker, 2 NFL corners. How are they going to rebuild all of that? Even if Eli's done a good job of restocking the cupboard better than most Missouri coaches, this is a good test for their defense. Castellanos is a fun player. He's tough to stop. He creates a different dynamic on the field. This is a good test. They're a 17-point favorite though for a reason. So just let's see what happens. But I like Missouri in that one. All right, on the negative side of last week, Auburn's offense is.
That wasn't negative. That was hilarious.
8.9 yards per play. Peyton Thorne had 4 interceptions. One of them was called back. That was a pick 6 early in that game, which is one of the flukiest plays I've ever seen. It just bounced off the ground. They lose to Cal. Is this still a bowl team? Is this just one of those Hugh Freeze moments that we were so accustomed to? Is there anything more to be read out of this game, or is this just maybe Peyton Thorne's not as good as Hugh Freeze thought he was? I don't know. What do you think?
I'm thinking
what's the takeaway?
This is not a well-coached team. The easiest way to attack this is about Peyton Thorne, and then it's about the defense, and then it's about, well, the NIL doesn't look like it literally is paying off at skill, but you can do that. You can. Go look at this coaching staff. This is not the coaching staff he told everyone he was going to bring in, this all-star staff. This is the Hugh Freeze usual suspects, and this looks like a later era Ole Miss team right now that's susceptible to emotional swings and inconsistency. You got what you paid for. That's the shortest way I can say this. If you are really, really sound, defensively sound, you can give this look. I know that everyone's most kids are getting paid now, so I shouldn't feel as bad. It's not like we're beating up on amateurs or like students.
Yeah.
But I still feel
I don't feel as bad.
But I will like Peyton Thorne has never once said like that he is the Heisman. Like he's not out there throwing his chest out. Peyton Thorne has shown you what he is. He's given you the information out there at multiple schools now. So for him to carry this burden, I think is incorrect. Like, okay, there were so many opportunities, Braden, for them to portal a better quarterback. I'm not going to blame the quarterback they start if the quarterback they start is below standard.
That's why I said last week, I guess maybe Peyton Thorne is better than Hugh Freeze thinks he's better than anyone else thinks he is what I said last week on the show. And here they are 4-8 in their last 12. And their last,
he has the same. He's one under Harson's record through the same amount of games.
4-8 in their last 12. Here are his wins: Alabama A&M, Arkansas, Vandy, Mississippi State, Samford, UMass, and Cal. Those are his wins at Auburn. I'm not saying it wasn't a rebuilding job. I'm not saying that the anonymous scouting report on Brian Harsin that pissed him off wasn't accurate. I agree with it. But
oh God, he got so mad. He DM'd me.
He did.
I haven't talked about this on any show before, but he DM'd me for like a week, and then finally I was like, "Here's my number. Call me." And I don't think, as far as I know, I don't have any Idaho.
When you bring it, there's 2 different types of coaches. When you bring the DM message off Twitter and they call you immediately, or you bring the DM message off Twitter and you never hear from them again.
Yeah,
those are the 2 kinds of coaches. Otherwise, they got New Mexico this week. That's a win. They've got a couple other easy wins. Vandy, Kentucky. I think they can get to 6, but we'll see about that. South Carolina, Kentucky. Speaking of, this is utterly fascinating because you and I probably agreed last week, and we're both very, very wrong about this. But it is how it happened that is the most concerning thing for me. And I'm not. I have to say this in the right way because I think people hear, "Oh, I think Mark Stoops could." This is trending towards an unraveling in which he checks out, and I don't want that to sound like he doesn't care or he's not there or he's not into it or whatever. But to be great at Kentucky, you need to be 100% at all times. And if you are just 95%, Kentucky will get destroyed by Georgia this weekend and will lose a bunch of the games on a very difficult schedule. And I think I've said it all along. I thought Stoops was going to retire at the end of the year for a number of reasons. It's a lot of context clues. It's a little bit of talking to folks around the program, but largely I just have a feeling. And when you cover this game long enough, sometimes you just get a feeling. And that performance is a type of performance that will drive a guy who is built on identity and line of scrimmage play.
Mm-hmm.
When you get that dominated, that is the kind of thing that if it happens over and over again, will drive a guy to say, enough's enough. I've done all I can at Kentucky. I'm going to ride off into my bourbon, fueled bluegrass farm of horses and just kind of sit back and enjoy life. I mean, I don't know. They're teetering and they have a very difficult schedule, starting with Georgia this weekend.
I wonder if there's a way to lose this and gain any kind of momentum.
To Georgia?
Well, they're going to lose. I'm trying to paint a realistic situation in which he can salvage this, because they have Ohio before they go to Ole Miss. Regular Ohio, not Ohio State. And I can't really find it, because I do think that I think the seam started to show a little bit on the structure that he was using to maintain success these last couple of years. Rotating portal quarterbacks with OCs as frequent as he did.
It's not sustainable.
It's fine until it's not. But mathematically, if you just believe it, if you believe in the odds that every coin flip is truly 50-50, then you're going to end up in a bad combination. You're going to end up the inconsistency on offense. But because some of those years were feast, this like weird renting of like Sean McVay tree play callers, and then he grabbed a guy from the Niners one year, I can't remember his name, and like it was a series of temporary solutions.
Rich Scarangella, I believe was his name.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like a series of short-term solutions is going to harm you in the long term, without a doubt. So they are reaping what they sowed.
Georgia at Ole Miss, at Florida, at Tennessee, at Texas, mixed in Auburn and Louisville. By
the way, huge revenge game for Louisville too.
At Louisville looks, if Tyler Shuck, also like Diego Pavia, if Tyler Shuck is intact and fully healthy at that time, Louisville will be extremely dangerous.
That'll be a kitchen sink game for Jeff Brom because of the recruiting going on in the city of Louisville. Yes. Because Kentucky has dominated that part, like that city specifically. With that coaching staff has been very successful in recruiting, and that's kind of like Louisville's recipe to, I wouldn't say rebuild because they won double-digit games. I don't think they're going to win that game.
So, are you with me on they play 1, 3, 5, and 7 right now in the rankings over the next.
Louisville's 19th,
and Louisville's ranked as well. Look, I know they've played very well at Florida, but who knows where Florida's going to be at that point? Who knows where this is? I don't know. I am concerned about the unraveling that could happen if things go wrong. That would be my concern. So that's all.
The relationship's never been good between he and Mitch Barnhart. It's especially bad now. And my sort of go-to talking point on this is that the bloom was off the rose before Texas A&M happened.
Yep.
Before.
Yep.
His behavior after the Louisville game specifically was very much of a man who thought he was catching a plane out of town because the negotiations had started like 2 days before, and he felt very good. He was according to the then AD at Texas A&M, he was the guy.
Yeah.
And so he did not expect to end up back in Kentucky, and it shows in so many ways.
All right. South Carolina is the other side of this equation. Could not be a more different performance from week 1 to week 2. So who are they? What's real? I do think their defensive line talent is going to be real salty and cause problems this year. They have 10 sacks on the season already. They had 11 tackles for loss in that game. They completely dominated. They play LSU this weekend. I think it's a far more interesting test for Garrett Nussmeier and LSU's offense than I expected it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a really good challenge for that group. I don't know what else South Carolina is, though. I really don't.
Well, I'm here for my expertise, and you may be talking to the only human being in the national media who watched 3/4 of LSU Nichols last weekend because his in-laws were in town. So let's start from that perspective. LSU's sleepy. They're sleepy right now. There are, I still think, fundamental like schematic inconsistencies in the new defense in terms of execution, because there's just simple stuff like gap coverage, like Nichols quarterback, like hitting 40-yard runs and stuff like that. This is not the time for that. You need to come into conference play, especially with the non-conference loss, which is a good loss, and we're fine with that loss. Everybody's good with that if we're building LSU a resume here. That's not going to hurt them.
Sure.
But you have to have solved for X on a couple things that I'm still a little curious about. I really liked their offensive game plan against USC. I think going into this USC,
I agree.
They will be fine. Nussmeier is I slept on that totally. I thought he was really crisp. And I thought that I don't know how much of this was situational to USC and what they thought D'Anton Lynn was going to do to them, or is it just how they're going to operate where it didn't seem like they missed QB run that much?
Well, and they're more equipped to their offensive line, I think, is much, isn't it? To me, it seems like it's much better in pass pro than it is in run blocking. I don't know.
I mean, they certainly were against USC.
And we'll find out against, again, Dylan Stewart's great. He's clearly the real deal. So I don't know. This is a game that we've kind of pointed to games. Last week we said, look, we're going to know a lot more about Arkansas. I'm not sure actually what we learned about Arkansas, that they might be better than we think, but still Arkansas. Mississippi State was not competitive against Arizona State, so we learned a lot more about them. Still a sort of a clunky offense. Still got to work through some issues there. Line of scrimmage, a major problem for Mississippi State. We still haven't figured out exactly what Oklahoma is, but we're going to find out a lot about South Carolina and LSU. I think more so than we expected in this game. So
this is an 11 a.m. kick, right?
It is 11 a.m.
So ask any LSU fan that there is a sort of phobia, wives' tale, I don't know, about road SEC games that kick at 11. I'm serious. Ask the whole LSU nighttime thing is more than a preference. It's more than a marketing deck. They really, truly don't want
call it a voodoo legend.
I don't know how I can describe this and not get sort of stereotypical, but they don't want toe to meet leather any earlier than 3:30. And it's not like any fan base loves the 11 a.m. kickoff.
Is stereotypical? Can stereotypical be a positive thing if everything about that stereotype I personally love? I love everything about LSU football.
I don't think they take offense to it, but I will say that they drag on road games, early road games in conference play. They have this isn't a Brian Kelly thing. This is a brand history. So will be interesting to watch that part of it. And I will look, I'll give Williams-Brice their flowers a little bit, disproportionate to what South Carolina delivers in football. That home environment delivers in atmosphere inside the stadium around it. It's a fairgrounds, but this goes back in the stadium.
This goes back to our original conversation about sort of what these programs are and their expectations, which is they have functioned in large part as a winning program in every way but results on the field. Fan base, recruiting base, money, stadium, atmosphere, the whole deal functions like a program that is used to contending at a high level, and it's just never happened on the field. So it's just one of those things.
They make tailgating in a train car look fun.
It's good. Hey, I've done that at Louisville, by the way, and
I've done that at Louisville. Yeah,
it's quite fun for a Kentucky game, actually. All right, so Alabama. Let me ask you this about Alabama. That you look at the numbers, whether it's defense, offense, box score, whatever. The numbers look great. Okay. Milroe, yards per attempt, offensive yards per play, rushing offense, pressure on defense, talent. It all looks great on paper. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin, I don't know, and you and I were texting about this. We don't know if Wisconsin has. I don't think Tyler Van Dyke to me is not the answer to attack Alabama.
That whole scheme, it's a mess. It's really bad.
If you ever need to see what square peg round hole looks like in human form,
Bill Longo,
it's the Wisconsin offense. So I don't know if we're going to learn that much, but that's a tough atmosphere. That's a well-coached defense. We'll see what happens, what Luke Fickell draws up for. But is there anything that you think that you've seen in the first two games that actually tells you that Alabama's not what we thought they were? I mean, I thought they were a playoff team. I had them at number 2 in the SEC ahead of Texas.
I don't have them. I didn't have them that high.
Might be wrong.
Yes, I didn't have them that high. We are not far from the Georgia game.
So not two in the nation, 2 in the SEC, just for the record.
Yeah, still too high. The thing is, I have them at 3, which isn't obviously that far away, but it's the degrees of separation, because I do believe there is inarguably a Texas and a Georgia together, and then there's that sub tier that we open the show with, and then Alabama is squarely in between those, and that's roughly what I've seen thus far. Does Wisconsin have a capacity to disrupt either side of the ball? I don't think so. I do love Fickell as a defensive coach. Personnel wise, not there. Year two, moving slower than maybe the portal era might encourage one to move. That was kind of the knock on Fickell, like when Auburn kicked the tires on him very briefly. Offensively, I have said this. I don't have anything against the man. I never understood. So if you don't remember, Phil Longo ran a breakneck hurry up offense for North Carolina, Ole Miss, Sam Houston State. Like, he comes from that part of Texas of just like rip and run. It caused a sort of lopsided. You can go look at the defensive stats at North Carolina. He's kind of the bane of a lot of defensive coordinators who worked opposite him. So for Fickell to hire him, it never made sense to me.
Didn't he have AJ Brown and Elijah Moore and Evan Ingram, and like that Ole Miss offense was loaded.
Who's the guy who plays for the Bills now? Ole Miss, the tight end,
Dalton Kincaid.
So Dalton Kincaid,
that's Utah.
No.
I know who you're talking about. The other guy, the other tight end.
He never caught a touchdown in college, ever.
Why am I drawing a blank on him? Very athletic, white guy. I can't remember. Here's an interesting question from Andrew. Andrew says, defense takes 3 years, portal or no portal?
Dawson Knox. God,
Dawson Knox. Yeah, we should have known that. Defense takes, I think the offensive line takes, and this is all to go back to Texas for just a second. What makes Texas so special this year is like 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. I think their top 10 offensive linemen are all homegrown recruits by Sark. But do you subscribe to the defense takes 3 years? I think you can go get a guy or two.
Can I ask Andrew a second, like a follow-up here?
I guess.
Is there a level you're inheriting? Like, are we starting from scratch? Are we Michigan State right now with Jonathan Smith, or does he mean something like a Wisconsin situation?
Well, how about Ole Miss?
Ooh, that's a tougher one.
Ole Miss is the experiment, right?
Post probation on defense, so the first thing that happens, and we may never see this again because who knows what the NCAA is doing. Ole Miss, I think, will be the last time you'll have a case study of losing scholarships on like an impactful Big Two program. He said Wisconsin, Tennessee, Ole Miss, lots of examples. Okay. When you have a scholarship reduction, which may never happen again, right? The first place you feel it is in the lines. You can't have depth of line play. You could have a couple good linemen maybe on either side or both. You won't have the depth of line play. So that's what breaks you eventually in Big Ten SEC play. All right. At a place like Wisconsin, the apparatus was functional. They were not terrible the year before the change was made. They were just lacking under Paul Chryst. I would say this year, and we haven't gotten to conference play yet for Wisconsin, they should be above the standard that they wanted to be, hiring a guy like Fickell. And that offense, I think, hurts it. I think that's why he's asking this.
I follow. It's one step back, 2 steps forward in year 2 is what it should be.
So,
right?
And yes, and I think in this could be Wisconsin, Ole Miss, or Tennessee. Tennessee's a pretty good. Tennessee took its time mainly because you know what they did? It's like 3-card money. They're like, hey, look at all this amazing offense. Look at this win over Alabama. By the way,
while we recruit top 5 defensive lines
quietly via high school, complimenting pieces in the portal. Yeah. It's funny because Florida State's going to end up getting a bad knock for this because the year they're having. Last year's Florida State team is about as good an example as we've seen so far of retrench, go to good, like you're in a good high school state, work it for 3 years, complement with pieces. That's what you're supposed to do.
Isn't that what
screwed up with the quarterback?
Isn't that what Brian Kelly's kind of trying to do, right? Portal first 2 years, recruit in-state next year.
Yeah, he's trying to, and I'll give him credit. He's the best thing that Brian Kelly does is ruthlessly evaluate and hire his own staff, and so changing the DC midstream, I think, could be interesting. I don't know, but yeah, you could see the vision there. Yes, I mean he has Frank Wilson too, who's like the best recruiter in the history. of the
game. All right, one of the games I actually do want to focus on as a football game because I think whatever comes out of this game is going to be fascinating, no matter what happens.
Georgia State and Vandy,
absolutely. Billy Napier's decision to start Graham Mertz is odd to me. I think if you're trying to sell your boss on the vision of the future and you want to give yourself the best chance at creating upside, it's to take your superstar talent that looks like he's the real deal in DJ Lagway, and that is to play him against a very athletic and talented defensive front at home in a critical must-win game, especially when you know the other quarterback, Connor Wigman, has not found what it's supposed to be yet with Colin Klein. You're at home. Like that, to me, this makes – I know Graham Mertz is efficient and consistent and sort of gives you a floor. I get that, but that's not what's going to get fans excited. It's not what's going to get the boosters excited, who are eventually going to put that pressure on the AD. To me, this doesn't make any sense. That's what makes it interesting to me. is that it should. I think it's 10-0 at the end of the first quarter, and DJ Lagway comes in the second quarter and is the guy the rest of the way. And I think
10-0 who?
Texas A&M.
Okay.
Yeah. No, they're gonna go 3 and out. We're gonna go. We need a new thing.
How much of a dick am I gonna be about this? I think $26.7 million is a lot of money, and I think he's clearly shopping for real estate in the Caribbean, and he's just packing it in. To be honest with you, because the desperation level that you should have going into conference play after what you put on the field against Miami is live with the fact that Lagway is going to create more turnovers because he's young, but put your best player on the field. Full stop.
Yeah.
And he's
upside, excitement, potential to win.
There is no argument. I always try and explore the other. No, that is the only thing that you're doing. Or you're looking at timeshare somewhere or investing prop. I don't know what the hell he's doing. I mean, like
fucking nobody buys a timeshare. Stop it.
No, $26.7 million. You could buy the company that makes the timeshare.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably what he's doing. Maybe he's just going to open like some sort of construction. I don't know.
You buy the company that buys out timeshares.
He's clearly not worried like the rest of us would be.
Also like he's just, and I've always been very complimentary of his temperament.
Yeah.
I think he has the right temperament to sort of be a CEO and handle pressure and sort of slowly build things like he did at Louisiana. And frankly, like he has done off the field for Florida. The next coach will be in a much better situation than he was in when he got there. But that's only worth so much to the fans. Like they want to see excitement and they want to see winning. And I don't know. The 5-star quarterback does that for you. I don't know.
He should have thrown Mullen under the bus more than he did. I think there's a lot of things. Style. I know, but there's a lot of things. Well, I think Florida wasn't his style either. I think looking back, like this guy was built for like a Clemson or a South Carolina.
I was going to say West Virginia.
No doubt.
Absolutely. He strikes me as a really good coach at West Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. And probably would have been great there. Like it kind of reminds me of Neil Brown in some circumstances. Florida has yet to find its personality in a coach going on a decade plus.
Well, look, all these programs none of them are immune to bad decision making. None of them, a lot of them wander in the desert for big chunks of time. It is what it is. But Texas A&M minus 3.5.
Okay, you and I are both we're both fanboys on the Colin Klein offense. I want to see adjustment going back into a quality opponent. I want to see adjustment. I want to see it look more like we're finding what works for Connor and less like these are the throws that worked at K-State.
Okay, I can see that. What does that mean to you? Do you know what it means, or do you just want to see it? You'll know it when you see it.
No, I'm not ever one of those people who's like I'm as well versed an analyst as an actual coach. No, but just talking to people after the Notre Dame game, it was a little more like this is our new offense 101 versus like this is going to be best for Connor Weidman going into this situation, and so improvement there at the quarterback position for A&M, but then also in the play calling. That's what I'm looking for. Defense is going to be fine.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the defense. That's why I think that's why I think it's 10, 13, 14-0 going into the second quarter. And Napier's like, damn it. Okay, fine. DJ, get out there.
Well, and like K-State's really creative about running the ball. Like let's cook that up. Yeah. Like let's do some outside zone. Let's do some inside stuff. Let's like counter sweep reverse. Like let's get creative because I think the line's not great, but I don't think they're horrific.
It's not. It's not. Yeah, not great's the way to put it.
But I think you can still work.
Great.
I mean, you can still run through the gaps. Like, I think you have to get creative and run the ball here and and put him in high percentage throw scenarios.
You also have two backups, not one backup, but two backups that are very athletic. And if you wanted to mix in some packages for using your quarterback to run the football, you've got other names that are better than Connor Weidman for that. If you wanted to be creative with that, so we'll see.
Committee would not scare me if they went if they swapped out. I don't think that would be an issue.
No, not at all, not at all. All right, quickly here. No upset for Bama, right? We're good there.
No.
LSU -7 on the road. No upset there. You kind of side eyeing. Okay, no. Mm-hmm. Missouri -17 at home against Boston College. No upset there.
I don't know about the spread, but no upset.
Oklahoma -13.5.
Watch it.
They're going to be a big topic of discussion next week, I think.
Closer than 13 considerably, and I really like what John Summerall's doing.
John Summerall, future head coach in Lexington.
Somewhere in the SEC.
-24 for Ole Miss at Wake Forest. No concerns there, but a bona fide road game against a Power 4 team, sort of.
better.
Vandy only 10.5 over Georgia State. Are we at 3-0 for Diego Pavia mania?
Yeah, like that. It's one of the latest FBS head coaching hires in history, and they scraped a team together this year. Georgia State, I'm talking about.
Arkansas minus 24.5 against UAB. Trent
Dilfer. UAB is historically bad.
Former TV analyst turned football coaches. Not great start to the season.
ULM spanked them.
And we know what's happening in Boulder. Georgia minus 24 against Kentucky. That is painful. It's gonna be painful.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm not a gambler. I don't know if I'm taking the 24 there because Kirby will downshift into a pot boiler game.
If it's 24-3, it could absolutely be 24-3.
Yeah, I feel like it's a 16-point win because they get bored.
Yeah, I agree. Auburn over New Mexico. That's at home. Here's the one I'm circling, man. This is the one I'm circling. Upset alert. Mississippi State minus 11.5 at home against Toledo.
Jason Candle, if you don't know anything about the MAC, Jason Candle has essentially run the MAC's most talented program. And before you laugh, they sent a DB out in the first round this year that Nick Saban said on live television, we tried to tamper and get him in the portal. Right. Okay. He's a hell of a coach. He's been passed over inexplicably, and he had multiple offers to be a power 2 offensive coordinator. State is in repair. That's like, I'm not giving you any kind of, I'm certain it's been.
So that's not a crazy upset alert to be circling here. Mississippi State
11.5
at home against. I just think Toledo's feisty. I think they're feisty.
They have been in the early. I mean, as someone who actually pays attention to MAC football, yes, it feels a little bit beyond, but yeah,
I agree. I'm just saying.
Screw it. Let's ride. Yeah.
I'm just saying,
let's
like,
3.5
points is not an upset if you pick Florida. That's not a real upset. Like, that's just a football
All right,
game.
Then let's do it. I don't care.
Otherwise, we're not picking Vandy to lose. We're not picking Oklahoma to lose. Although that's the other one you're kind of.
That's the one I'm watching. That's the one I'm watching. Yeah.
Okay. Look, that John Summerall, very good coach. He brought about half that starting defense with him to Tulane, an established program that's used to winning.
Yeah.
That's a bad recipe.
Oh, by the way,
recipe.
If this goes the other way and Oklahoma smacks them, it's very, very quality win, confidence building, all of those things, because it won't look like, oh, you just beat a G5 team.
But it does in fact change a little bit of the professional narrative.
I think Tulane's a better team than Boston College and Wake and a lot of these other non-conference opponents on the schedule this week.
Better than Boston College? Come on now.
I think beating Florida State's a hell of a lot easier than people realize.
I do think the market's overcorrected on them, though. I think they're going to beat Memphis.
Yeah.
Former assistant coach, 6.5 point spread. I got the Noles minus 6.5 this week because I think the market overcorrected.
I mean, you would think so. And
coming off
Memphis is Memphis is fast but not special, and I don't know if they can run the ball the same way the other two teams have run the ball on Florida State.
Bye week, pissed off for greatness, former team. It's a bad recipe for Memphis.
Man, Norvell better not lose.
It's a bad recipe for you. Look, the last week you said that about Shane Beamer, and look what happened.
Yeah, but guess what? Shane Beamer has now beaten Kentucky 4-3 his entire run here, and he still has the same problems.
No, I know.
I'm sticking with that one.
All right. Okay.
Kentucky,
what else?
Kentucky's bad.
This is not ultimately. Let's finish up
if I'm throwing out recommendations. Thursday night, Friday night, 3 really good games. Thursday night, Friday night. Both Kansases are playing, and then Arizona State, Texas State on Thursday night, K-State, Arizona, and then Kansas and UNLV. All 3 of those games are going to be fun to watch.
Barry Odom doing work, former Missouri coach.
Dude, Barry Odom trying to get back to the SEC.
Well, this sort of wraps it all up because we opened with playoff contention now features paying attention to everything. And absolutely, this is a weekend. Not a lot of marquee showdowns. There's no Texas, Michigan. There's none of that stuff on the schedule this week across the country. But there's a lot of stuff that's going to matter to your team in the playoff race, and that's where we're at. Arizona, Kansas State. Kansas is playing. It's going to matter, and so you got to pay attention now to everything, which is great because guys like us love this shit. So
I would, if you're an SEC fan, keep track of those top end, which is it's hard to define Big 12 teams because I think they may beat themselves into a one bid league. Sorry, by October. That's what I was trying to say.
Kansas already losing is good for SEC teams that are trying to get in, or anybody that's trying to get in.
Yeah,
because
and I definitely think it's gonna be K-State or Utah. I definitely think that.
I had Kansas State winning the conference in the preseason. I think they're built in the way to beat Arizona. But you want to watch future NFL player at wide receiver at Arizona, Tet McMillan, T-Mac. Watch him, and of course, they're a fun team. So just keep an eye on that Arizona Kansas State game. Other than that, at 38 Godfrey, splitzoneduo.com, Substack, and of course, all across the podcast apps everywhere you listen to your podcast. What else, Steven? Got anything else?
Washington Post, Split Zone Duo.
Oh, yeah.
I got more stuff coming. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're in the rhythm. We have our sea legs for the season. And by the way, the weeks that we say there's not a lot on paper are the weeks that we talk about 5 years later.
So Oklahoma's going to lose to Tulane. Boston College is going to beat Missouri. Alabama's going to lose to Wisconsin. There you go. All right. Otherwise, please rate, review, subscribe, thumbs up on YouTube, share the product, turn the notifications on, et cetera, et cetera. You guys know the whole deal. If you're watching, and we know plenty of you have been watching, so we do appreciate you guys. Otherwise, give Godfrey a follow. You can get to me at Braden Gall as well. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Enjoy week 3, and we shall talk to you next week.